got plenty of room.
I haven't. I need to have plenty of room to put my feet up. Ah, that's better.
Oh, you and your feet. Look what you're saying anyway, the camera's on.
Oh, is it? Goodness. Hello, everybody. This is Lacey. I hope you all had a really pretty week.
And hello everybody, it's Bert, and I've had a pretty week. And welcome to Magic Memory Sunday.
Well, it's my turn to choose to remember today.
I know.
Isn't it my turn?
Yes, it's your turn. What would you like to remember this week? We've done quite a lot, haven't we?
We have done a lot. What did I want to remember? Now, let me think. Icky. What did you want to remember?
Icky can't choose.
Icky can't choose. Icky wants the fat flu story again. Can we have the fat flu story?
The fat flu story? Oh, I don't know I can remember all of that again.
You don't have to. Do the magic, and we can hear it today.
All right, I'll do the magic. Right, okay then. Here we go. Magic voices fill the air. Magic memories take us there. Oh, I don't care.
Oh, I suppose you're trusting me now, because I wouldn't let nasty doggy jab nasty needles into me and Icky.
Nope. If you want to get fat flu and then give it to Icky, or then give it to me, then Mummy and Daddy and poor little Alfie, and probably all the day babies too, well, that's your choice. But I don't think it's very nice of you.
If I touch the flu...
Caught the flu?
all right. If I caught the flu, would everybody get it? Even the day baby?
They might if they hadn't had flu jab, yes. It's very contagious. That means it's easy to pass on from person to person. That's why it's important to have your flu jab, especially if you're old or very little, or can easily get sick, Impy. Flu can be very mean and nasty and heavy. That's why Mrs Spicky Sparrow always called it fat flu.
Oh, you know the story about the Spickies and fat flu, Bert? Oh, do you? Will you tell me?
Oh yes, Impy, I do indeed. About how Mr Spicky got an awful dose of the fat flu, and how Nixie Sparrow had to do something very brave to get him medicine. But, I can't tell it to you.
Oh, why not?
Well, princesses who say, I won't, and who refuse to get their flu jabs don't deserve stories, do they?
Oh,
But if you run and put your coat and boots on now and go with Mummy like a good girl, I'll tell you when you get back.
Bert, the promise?
Pinky promise.
Yeah. Oh, come on, we got to go. Mummy, oh, there you go. Mummy, I'm ready to go now. Come on, I'll get my coat on. Come on, and then I shut my eyes and I didn't look. And the nice doctor just said that I'd feel a tiny baby scratch.
Oh dear, poor Impy, darling. Did you cry?
Well, just a bit. Not like the little Alfie, though. The doctor says I was a very good girl, and he gave me a lolly for being brave. And he gave one to little Alfie, too, although he tried and tried.
He'll be okay soon. Mummy's putting him down for a nap now. There you are, you see?
Oh, Daddy, we don't like it when the little Alfie tries, do we, Icky? Now, but if I was a good girl, you promised to tell me about the Spickies and the fat flu and what Nixie Sparrow did that was so brave. Come on, tell me. Tell me.
Oh, I don't know that I'm going to, Impy.
Yes, you are. Tell me.
Oh, all right then. Sit up, though, you're heavy. Can't tell the story like that now, can I?
All right. Sit up, Icky. You're too heavy for Bert. Sit down here. Yeah, that's better.
Well, It all started on a wintry day, even colder than it is today, Impy.
Goodness gracious, that must have been really, really, really cold.
It was, Impy. There was frost on the ground, the water in all the bird baths was frozen, icicles dangled from the bare tree branches, and dingy grey clouds went scudding across a lowering black sky. As Mrs Spicky piled wood into the stove and shivered, she thought it looked like snow. Oh, absolutely. Mr Spicky had been out to have his usual fly around his territory, then to chop some logs and do any other jobs that needed doing. Now he pushed through the door of his nest, bringing in such a fierce gust of wind that the lamp, which Mrs Spicky had been obliged to light on such a dark day, was blown out.
Oh dear!
Dash my beak! Grunted Mr Spicky in a very hoarse voice. He dropped what he'd been carrying on the floor and, in the almost complete darkness, lurched against the table, making the dishes clatter.
Hold on, Spicky,
scolded Mrs Spicky.
you're all feet and feathers today. What's come to you?
She relit the lamp, picked up Mr Spicky's logs and added them neatly to the woodpile, then looked with disfavour at the few pitiful bits of food he'd been able to forage. I don't know, Mother, grunted Mr Spicky. I feel like old Jack Frost got into my brains and put a spell on me. He sank into his chair and gloomily began to sip the cup of nettle tea Mrs Spicky poured him. It was all they had.
Oh, the poor Spickies. Poor little birdies. They can't find anything nice to eat or drink in winter, can they, Bert?
No, they can't, Impy. Mrs Spicky gazed worriedly at her husband. She said.
I don't like it, Spicky, my dear.
She would have said more, but at that moment Mr Spicky made a sound so loud that Mrs Spicky sprang up into the air and bumped her head on the ceiling. She was a little bird, remember, and when she jumped she flapped her wings, which had taken her higher.
Oh, goodness. What sound did Mr Spicky make?
Can you guess? Mr Spicky said, "Chee-shoo!" It wasn't a quiet sneeze like yours or Mummy's, or a loud sneeze like mine, or a really loud one like Daddy's. It was a simply enormous sneeze, so loud you'd never think a tiny little bird could have made it. And having said it once, he said it again, and again, and again. Mr Spicky went on sneezing and sneezing, till poor Mrs Spicky had to put her wings over her ears. Finally he stopped. Then he mopped his eyes and his beak with a red spotted hanky.
Oh dear, oh dear. Oh goodness, poor Mr Spicky.
Right. Sneezing and sneezing like that isn't fun at all, Impy.
Great eagles,
cried Mrs Spicky.
Why, you've been and gone and caught fat flu, Father, that's what. Well, now we're in for it, and no mistake. You get yourself into bed, Spicky. I'll have to get my bonnet on. I'll need one of the children to go for the doctor.
Oh, Mrs Spicky always knows what to do, doesn't she, Bert?
Oh, yes, she does, sweetie girl. You'd know too if you'd brought up 9 little birdie children. Now listen. Mr Spicky tried to protest, but he felt too ill and weak. In less time than it took to say bicky wicky wee, he had been bundled upstairs, put into a pair of striped flannel pyjamas, had his chest and throat rubbed with some smelly ointment to help him breathe better, and, most trying of all, had a bright red knitted muffler wrapped around his neck and matching bed socks pulled onto his protesting feet. Then he was tucked into his bed and covers were piled on to keep him warm.
Oh, I'd be too warm with all that lot on me.
So would I, Impy, but remember, there was no central heating in the nest. Well, once Mrs Spicky had Mr Spicky settled, she put on her bonnet and shawl and flew down the row of little nests, knocking on doors and calling her 9 children to come out and hurry home immediately. You know, sparrow children grow up very fast, Impy. So Kixie, Lixie, Rixie and Tixie were now very young grown-up sparrows with nests of their own, and all 9 of the sparrow children would help their parents out in any way they could. It wasn't long before the whole family had gathered around the stove in Mrs Spicky's kitchen.
Oh, I love the Spickies. They're always so good to one another.
You're right. Why, Mother, said Trixie, who was the eldest, what could have happened? You look all to pieces.
Flu,
cried Mrs Spicky, wringing her wings. Flu, said Wixie, who was usually half asleep and didn't always think very fast. Flu? Oh, Flu, where?
Silly Wixie.
Yes, very silly. Now, shh.
No, son, nobody's flown nowhere. It's flu, fat flu. Father's been and caught it, and for Sky's sake, don't ask me how or where from, I don't know. Oh dear, oh dear.
Oh, Mrs Spicky's getting annoyed.
Well, I don't blame her. Now then, Mother, said Dixie, it's all right. Just tell us what we can do.
I need you to go and fetch Doctor,
said Mrs Spicky.
Trixie, you make some broth. Nixie, go and see what you can find. We need nourishing food. Pixie, see if you can find any water that ain't froze solid, or bring back small icicles we can melt. We has to have more water. You others, help out where you can. There's dears. I'm going back up to Father to wait for the doctor.
Mrs Spicky's lucky to have so many children to help out, isn't she, Bert?
Yes, she is. Well, there was such a bustling about and such a fluttering of feathers and such a pitter-pattering of little clawed feet, it almost made the nest shake. Dixie flew off right away and soon returned with Dr. Banty, who strutted into the nest, not a feather out of place in his beautiful fluffy white doctor's coat, his bright scarlet coxcomb hat perched jauntily on his head, and his sharp beady little eyes missing nothing.
Oh, is he one of those cute little kittens? The ones like Willow Reese who lives down on the farm has? She showed us pictures of them. She has them for pets. Oh, they're so sweet.
Well, he's a bantam cockerel, Limpy, and they can be very friendly, but they can also be a bit full of themselves. Hi, cockalorum, said Dr. Banty rather louder than he needed to, puffing himself up importantly. Cough drops and chamomile, fisherman's friend, where is the patient?
Oh, goodness.
Quite. Mrs. Spicky felt like covering her ears again, but she was too polite. She led Dr. Banty upstairs to where Mr. Spicky lay, swathed in blankets. Dr. Banty ripped them all off. Cenopod, syrupifix, he cried, his voice getting shriller and shriller. This will never do. Can't see a thing.
I don't like him. I think he's silly.
Well, we'll have to see. Mr. Spicky lay and shivered while Dr. Banty looked him up and down. He listened to his chest, peered down his throat, examined his eyes and ears. Finally, with a loud flapping that startled everyone, he flew up to the ceiling. Milk of magnesia, he yelled. Tinctures, Tylenol, Listerine and lozenges.
It's horrible.
Well, he's not easy to get on with, that's for sure, sweetie. Mrs. Spicky didn't think so. She tucked the covers tenderly around her shivering husband and glared up at Dr. Banty.
If you've been and made Father worse, I'll set Great Harry, the buff-old-Bingham cockerel from the big farm, on you. That's what, she said. Manners, my dollar morphine, said Dr. Banty, flipping his red coxcomb hat. Got to have manners in this world. Your husband just needs honey from the bee, that's what he needs. And with one last yell of Pepto-Bismol, he flew out of the window.
Oh, Dr. Banty might not be very nice, but I can't help liking him, but he is funny.
I suppose so. Now then, when the doctor had flown away, still yelling like a trumpet, Mrs. Spicky sat down in the chair beside the bed, put her wings over her eyes, and began to cry. Why, Mother, said Dixie, whatever is it?
Oh, blessed eagles, said Mrs. Spicky. Dr. Banty says your father has to have bee honey, and everyone knows there's none to be had this time of year. What are we going to do?
Wouldn't your friend Betsy Bebop give you a bit? She's let you have some before, suggested Trixie, who had come upstairs with the other older children, having heard Mrs. Spicky's sobs.
Betsy lives in a big hive down at the farm, said Mrs. Spicky. I wouldn't dare go near there. The bees will all be clustered together for warmth. I wouldn't know where to find Betsy, and if you tried to get any honey, well, I don't like to think of what would happen. No, we'll have to make do without it and hope for the best.
Oh, goodness gracious. I wouldn't like to do in a beehive, Bert.
Oh, no, we're lucky to be able to get honey in jars whenever we want, Impy Girl. Well, for 2 days they did without, and hoped for the best. Mr. Spicky got no better. In fact, he got worse. The 9 children took turns to be in the nest, making sure there was always someone around to help their mother.
Oh, they're so good and so kind and lovely.
Then, on the 3rd day, it was Nixie's turn to come and help, only he didn't turn up. Mrs. Spicky waited an hour, but no Nixie. She put on her bonnet and went down the row of nests to Nixie's. He wasn't there. Suddenly, she guessed where he'd gone. The scream she gave brought all the children running out of their nests.
Oh, goodness gracious. He hasn't gone in with the bees.
Ah, wait and see. Eagles, Mother, the children all said. Whatever's happened?
It's our Nixie, sobbed Mrs. Spicky. He's gone to ask Betsy Bebop for honey, and we'll never see him again.
Everyone went quiet and trooped back to the home nest. They all knew she was right. It was just the kind of brave thing Nixie would do.
Oh, poor Nixie. The bees haven't really stung him, have they, Bert?
Well, you'll just have to listen and find out. Now, Mrs Spicky had gone to the nest, and the children were all wiping their feet, ready to go inside, when they heard another piercing scream. They all rushed in, quite forgetting their muddy feet, and there, sitting calmly at the table, drinking a cup of nettle tea, was Nixie. Beside his cup was a little tree-bark pail, full to the brim with honey.
That's why you see, Icky. I told you the bees hadn't stung him. It's going to be all right, Icky. Oh, goodness me. How did you get that?
Well, that's what they all wanted to know, Impy. Mrs Spicky kissed and hugged Nixie till he could hardly breathe. All the others asked him over and over how he had got the honey.
My brave boy,
said Mrs Spicky, wiping her eyes because she'd been crying again.
Fancy going into a beehive and risking your life for your father.
A beehive, said Nixie. Eagles, mother. Brave I might be, but I'm not stupid. Betsy Bebop might be your friend, but she doesn't know me. I've never been near no beehive.
Then where did you get that honey from?
asked Mrs Spicky, quite bewildered. Oh, said Nixie. Well, I went down the farm and I remembered that big shed I'd seen where they takes the honey when they gets it out of the hive. I knew there had to be loads there. I've been down there for the last few days when I wasn't here. Well, today I got lucky. One of them humans come thumping down to fill up some jars. He put the honey in this big spinny machine that made it come out of the comb. When there was enough, I flew down and started flying around his head. He did, Impy. Now look what you've done. You've made me lose my place. Yeah, went on Nixie. I chased him and kept dive-bombing him till he ran out of the shed. It was funny, really. Me, a tiny little sparrow, and him a great big human thing. But he was scared of me. When he'd gone, I just flew back and filled up this little pail. Then I grabbed the handle in me beak and brought it down home. Easy, really.
He was ever so brave, wasn't he, Bert?
He was. He didn't know the farmer would be scared of him. It might not have worked. Well, Mrs Spicky used the honey to dose Mr Spicky, who began to get better. In a few days more, he was very much better, and definitely on the road back to becoming his old self.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Oh, so am I, Impy. On the morning when Mr Spicky was first able to go outside again, quite a while later, the first person he saw was Dr Banty, scratching for worms in a patch of dirt. "Cock-a-ding-doodle," he yelled, looking up suddenly. "Anison 3, vitamin B. I see you've recovered. My treatment never fails."
Oh, honestly, he's a silly banty rooster, isn't he, Icky?
Quite. "Your treatment fiddlesticks," snorted Mr Spicky. "What fool would prescribe honey in winter when there isn't none? It took my boy to make me better, not you." Dr Banty smoothed the elegant creases in his white feather trousers and looked down his beak. Emodium, he yelled. "Ingratitude is a terrible thing." And he flew away.
Oh, Bert! Oh, that was such a rich story. I love your story. I'm so glad I had my flu jab and I didn't have to worry everybody like poor Mr Spicky did.
No, Impy, darling. You won't get flu now. You're going to be a well girl all winter long.
I wouldn't mind the honey, though. We like honey, don't we, Icky?
I like honey too. Tell you what, how about we go and make some honey buns? We can have some for tea later. You can be my little helper.
Oh, yes. Can I wear my chef's outfit?
Yes, of course you can. Now, come on, Icky. I'm telling you, you go and wash your hands right now. I don't want dirty paws in the cake mixture.
Of course Icky's going to wash his hands. I'm going to wash my hands. Come on, Icky. We're going to wash our hands. And you're going to wear the other apron, the sugar and spice.
Oh, that Icky. He'd look really silly, wouldn't he, in your sugar and spice apron? I'm going to get him an apron of his own that says, "I am silly" on it.